the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, make us worthy, O Lord, to say thankfully, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, now and forever. Amen. Okay, please, if you have questions, I've received some questions, and I want to make sure that we cover the questions before we start the new session. I know it's getting a little bit more difficult, and you might be in too much details area of the Bible, and later on the details will go, and we might have more history. So let's go through the questions from last time and see if we can cover those questions that you had hard time with. So would be 7b, and we are looking at questions 3. To prepare for the covenant, the Israelites were to agree to obey God and trust Him, to abandon the worship of all other gods, to wash their clothes and abstain from marital relations for 3 days, to fast for 3 days and 3 nights. The preparation was those conditions, those 2 conditions, to wash their clothes and abstain from marital relationship for 3 days. When they were asked to agree, that was the ceremony itself. It's almost like, it's almost like the question in marriage or in any covenant. Do you take this husband to be yours, or to take this wife to be yours, in health and sickness, poverty and wealth? And the person says, I do. This happens in the ceremony. That's not a preparation. The 4th question in the covenant ceremony, God gave the 10 Commandments by speaking them to all Israel first. Yes, He did speak to them. They couldn't understand. They couldn't understand God, and it was so terrible and fearsome that they had to ask Moses to mediate and to go between God and them. And they didn't want to speak to God face to face because they felt they would be dead. So speaking to them to all Israel first, the 10 Commandments were spoken to all Israel first, before they decided not to hear them. Writing them on tablets of stone at first? No. This was not the case. He spoke them first. Asking Moses to go up the mountain to receive them, that's a typo. To receive them? No. That's when he received the 2 tablets. Speaking them to Moses first? He didn't speak to Moses first. The 10 Commandments was the second choice. Now we go to 11. Breaking these commandments are punishable by death in the Hellenistic numbering, and we talked about 3 different numbering systems for the commandments, and the Hellenistic is the one that we use in the Orthodox Church. And by the way, the synagogue uses the three systems side to side, like we did in the table. If the commandments are arranged in order of importance, then I expect the first 7 commandments to be very detrimental, very bad to break them. So it is the first 4 which belongs to God, 5 is the honoring of the father and mother, 6 is the murder, 7 is the adultery, all the way to 7. Stealing, bearing false witness, and coveting is not punishable by death. 13. The greatest commandments are the two commandments found in Deuteronomy 6. In Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, we only have one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your might. The other one is in Leviticus 19:18. The greatest commandments are the summary of the 10 commandments. True, because the first 4, according to Hellenistic numbering, is the love the Lord your God. And the last 6 is love your neighbor as yourself. It's found in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. No, you find the 10 commandments in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. The greatest commandments are found in Deuteronomy 6:4 and Leviticus 19:18. None of the above? No, it is actually B. 14 Deuteronomy precautions for keeping the 10 commandments included loving the neighbor, the mezuzah and the tefillin, the Shema prayer, and the tablets of stone. No, it is the mezuzah and the tefillin. All right, and I had a couple of other questions, and I want to answer them before we move on to the next session. So someone asked, how come that God accepted into him and was okay with someone like Jacob when he tricked his brother and cheated and lied, and someone like Moses whom Moses killed a man and used him for a covenant mediator, or someone like who was the third one I got in the message? So someone like who else he accepted? And okay, so they compare this to, so for example, Moses killed a man. How come Cain was expelled, was excommunicated when he killed his brother? Why Moses was accepted and became a mediator? How come Ishmael did not do what Jacob had done, but he was excommunicated too? So what is the point? And that's a very good question, actually. Here is the point. Let's focus on Jacob. So Jacob becomes our example. What was good about Jacob and what was bad? What was good about Jacob? Jacob was very keen on God's blessing. He will fight for it. He will steal. He will do anything. The goal is to take the blessing. He cared about it a lot. In return, Esau was a cool man. Really cool. He didn't care. Want to take it? Go ahead. So, Esau did not do what Jacob had done. What's the problem with Esau? What's the problem with Esau? He cared less about God. He cared less about the relationship with God. So this is a very important question, because someone might say, I'm a good man. Do I have to be a believer? I'm a good man. Do I have to be a part of the church? Isn't it enough that I'm a good man? It is really to the heart of everything we're talking about. So someone cares about the covenant with God. They want to be the family of God. But they're lying. They're sinful. They're weak. They make mistakes. They cheat. Some people say this to me. Say, I know people outside the church who are 1,000,000 times better than the church people that you care about. What should I say? You're right. You're right. There are people out there who will be more humans than people in the church. Does that make them more closer to God? Because we're talking about here about God's choices, right? God is choosing Jacob to make the covenant with, but he didn't choose Cain. He didn't choose Esau. What's the point? The point is God is not troubled by our sinfulness. Sin to God, he has a solution for. What does God have no solution for? What is it in Esau that God has no solution for? Jacob cheating and lying and all that stuff, God has solution for it. He's gonna, beat him up for it, and he will be fixed. At the end of his life, Jacob will be a saint, either he liked it or not. But how did God do that? What's the difference? He is with God. God's going to fight with him. He's part of the family. Say, any of the fathers would say, my children are not perfect, but my neighbor's children are perfect. Who's my responsibility? Who can I deal with? My children or neighbor's children? My children. I will beat them up. I will beat them into shape some way or another. But if someone doesn't want me to be their father, can I do anything with them? No. They can be whatever they want to be. They don't want to relate to me. They have nothing to do with me. That's why when I talk about the covenant here, it is a must. It is a must to understand what's a covenant. Because in the Bible from beginning to end, you have, let me show you, the list is huge. Of people that belong to God that was not perfect. You're talking about Isaac, we don't have much about him. You're talking about Jacob, right? Jacob was a cheater, filled with guile. He wanted to do everything his way. He wanted to get away with it. But he had one thing for him. He wanted to be with God. He wanted to be part of that covenant that God made with Abraham. He's not going to let it go. He's going to be part of the family. Against anybody's wishes. His father, his brother, doesn't matter. He's going to have it. And when the time came for him, he had to have it, even if God said, no, I'm going to be your son. No matter what. I will do anything that takes to be your son, to be your child, to be part of that covenant. That is Jacob. How about Moses? Why did Moses kill the man, the Egyptian? Was he a serial killer? Was Moses a serial killer, a murderer? No. Why did he kill him? Because he was abusing one of the Jewish family, of his family. So he, on a human level, out of zeal for his people that was persecuted bitterly, wanted to defend the Israelite and kill the Egyptian. Does it really justify it? No, it doesn't justify the murder. But there is something there in Moses that makes him very special. Will God do something about it? Yes. Moses spent more than lifetime in prison for it. What's lifetime in prison? What do you call it, lifetime? I know in Egypt, I don't know here, it's maybe more. 25 years. If someone kills and is not going to get capital punishment, they spend 25 years in prison. Moses spent 40 years away from civilization by himself in the wilderness. And Moses changed. He was from a murderer at 80 years old. He's already 80 years old. The Bible called him the most patient man on earth. The most patient. So what happened? From someone who's very aggressive and angry to somebody who is cool. Even when God said to him, go back to Egypt, he said, no, I'm not going to go. How many times he asked him to do this? How many objected? How many times objected? 5 times. He didn't want to do anything with it. So Moses got disciplined. Jacob got disciplined. The key thing is they wanted to be part of the family. They did not want to be outside the family. I remember this. I watched this movie. It's beautiful. If you watch it, it's one of the renderings of the stories of Padre Pio, a Catholic priest who had the stigmata in the time of World War II. And the bishop was coming to talk to him about the stigmata. You made yourself a famous figure. You are attracting people to follow you. Who are you? The church doesn't need the likes of you. What did he say in the movie? I like that a lot. That kind of pinned it. What did he say? Remember? Anybody saw the movie? Padre Pio, miracle man. Huh? But I need the church. That's what he said. So there are people who need the church. There are people who doesn't need the church. People who cares to be part of the family. People who doesn't care to be part of the family. And this is what we're talking about here. If you care to be part of the family, God is able, this is what God is, to change you. You don't want to be part of the family, God cannot do anything. You want to have nothing to do with him. That's fine. Okay? You're fine. That's why you're going to find. How about David? God said about David, this is a man according to my heart. He is according to the heart of God. Means whatever God likes to have in a man. But what did David do? 2 Samuel chapter, anybody remember? We just studied that. What chapter was that? Chapter 11. What happened in chapter 11, 2 Samuel? David commit adultery with a woman who is married, while she's still married, and the man is alive, and the man actually is fighting for David outside in the war. But then she got pregnant, he didn't know what to do with, brought his husband back, had him drunk, fed him 2 nights in a row, tried to push him to sleep with his wife to cover up for his crime. Didn't happen. So he had no choice but to do what? Send the man to the war until the leader of the army, Joab, let him be killed. And who carried the letter? The man himself. He went to Joab, the king is giving you this letter. He opens the letter, look at the letter, look at the man, said, okay. He took him, put him in front of the wall, and have everybody withdraw. So they saw a single man fighting by himself in front of the wall of Rabbah, the capital of Moab, and they killed him. So he sent back and said, there's few people killed in the army, don't be angry, because Uriah was killed too. And David said, don't worry about it. Nathan said, what is this? What is this? Are you the man of God? Is this how you should behave and be an example to the whole people? This was David. How about Peter? How about Peter? What did Peter do? I don't know the man. What? You spent 3.5 years with him, and at the end of it, before he's actually being processed to be killed, and that's what he gets from you. I don't know the man. So why is God okay with these people? You're going to tell me this? I'm going to tell you because he's God. He's not me and you. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't keep the company of somebody who does this to me. But because I'm not God. Right? But God says, you stay with me. With your weakness, I'll fix you. You stay away from me, no matter how good you are. I don't know what I'm going to do to you. I can't do anything to you. We get this? So that's why I'm studying here what is the biggest concept that we're talking about. The covenant. The covenant is God's faithfulness. It depends on Him being faithful, not on us. It doesn't give me a license to be a killer or a fornicator or an adulterer, but I know I'm weak, and He knows I'm weak. But I stick with Him. Why? Because it's said about Him, Jesus was the lover of what? Sinners. He was the friend of sinners. He was not a friend of righteous people. He would leave the righteous people in the church and go look for one sinner. That's what Jesus is about. So you're going to notice this in the Bible. The Bible is very frank about it. It doesn't cover anything. Even king like David should have covered for him. No, nobody covered for David. Nobody covered for Peter. Peter himself was telling the story to everybody with tears. Okay, we get that. That's the answer to the question. Because it's mainly God is interested in a family. It doesn't matter if we have weaknesses, if we are so angry or so lustful or so corrupt and we so this and so that, it doesn't bother God. What bothers Him is that we say, no, we don't want you, we don't have nothing to do with you, we don't want to be part of your family. That Cain. Cain said, I'm not me, I don't know, that's not me. Okay. Esau. God says that you don't need to marry those Canaanite women. I see they're very beautiful. What about it? What's wrong with that? I know better. Just bring me those couple of girls and I see them every day in the market. I'll marry them together. One ceremony. We get done with it. And he was willing to take more. Why? He doesn't care. He does not care. When his brother was, would you sell anything for a lentil stew? Will you? Will you give up your backpack for a lentil stew when you're hungry? He gave up his firstborn right. Why is that? He doesn't care. He doesn't care. While Jacob is going to fight with his teeth for it, Esau doesn't care. The whole point is not being a good person or a bad person. The whole point is, do you want God or you don't want him? That's basically it. Very simple. You want him, you're the most corrupt person. You become a saint like Moses the Black. You might be the best person in the world. Don't want God, that's it. You're not part of his family. You're not part of his family. You're going to listen to the wicked one who said, eat from the tree, be like him. You don't need him. That's exactly it. So that's the answer to this question. I have 4 more on the chat. So that's why the covenant thing is very important when you understand it. Is rabbinic found in Masoretic and Hellenistic found in Septuagint? Then where do we find Latin Vulgate in current translations? And that's a good question. You're right about the first two. The Latin Vulgate, I think it might be in the Catholic versions, maybe the New American, I'm not sure, but I'm just suggesting. What is 5:11 Bathsheba? I don't know what that is, Seraphim is saying. Yes, Dr. Amgad, it's true. Rabbinic is in the Masoretic and the Hellenistic found in Septuagint, but you wouldn't have the division into different commandments. You would, I would say it's implied. I didn't really look that careful, but you're right. And the Vulgate most probably will be one of the translations of the Catholic Church. They use few of them, like New Jerusalem and New American. Okay, all right. Is it question number 5? Huh? I don't understand. Huh? Okay, all right. Okay, that's it. So these are the questions I had, and now we go into the new one. Now we're going into the deep waters. We're swimming into deep, deep, deep waters. Okay, so I'm going to go back, and this one I added a little bit more about the Torah itself because we skipped that part, and I wanted to do it when we have a chance. What are the books of the Torah? What do they contain? Today we're going to have a big, quick summary of the books of the Torah. What happened between Exodus and reaching the Promised Land? There's 2 points. Exodus from Egypt, it's going to be on this side, and the Promised Land. And there is 40 years in between. And these 40 years are covered in Exodus from 14, the crossing of the Red Sea, all the way to Deuteronomy 32. The whole books of the Bible, of the Torah, except 1 book and a half, which is Genesis and first half of Exodus, is going to be, or the first third of Exodus, is going to be outside, but the 2/3 of Exodus and the rest of the books, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, will be covered in that trip. What events happened by Mount Sinai, Kadesh Barnea, and the end of the desert wandering, which we call the Plains of Moab. And the Plains of Moab, there's a specific area. By the way, 8:4 and 8:5 are the Plains of Moab, but one of them is a different town than the other. The first town is called Kadesh Barnea, and today they think it is, you know where is Kadesh Barnea? Today they think it is Petra. You know the word, the city of Petra? That's where they think Kadesh Barnea is. And the other one is Acacia Grove, and I don't know what contemporary places is. But they both, 8:4 and 8:5, is the Plains of Moab. Now, the reading will be, like I said, from chapter 20 all the way to Deuteronomy. If you want to read something, you know. The first group of books in the Old Testament are the 5 books of Moses, known as the Pentateuch. Pentateuch is the Greek for the 5 books. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The narrative of the story of salvation is found in the 3 books. Genesis, the first half of Exodus, and Numbers. while the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy are books of laws and commandments and contain little history, little narrative. This group of books is called the Torah, or the books of the law. So we spoke about Genesis. We're just going to go quickly over it. I don't want to spend more time because we spend a lot of time on Genesis. It's a narrative book. It's all story, 50 chapters, all story. And it contains the creation, the four major points: the creation, the fall and the beginning of nations, the covenant relationships that God has with his people, Adam, Noah, and Abraham. You can say Adam was not a covenant. He created them in a family. He created him inside of it. It's almost like a relationship between a father and child. You don't make a covenant with your baby. The baby is born in your family. It's almost like spontaneous. That's why Adam is a little bit unique. He's born into this. He's born in the image of God. He's born into the greatest relationship ever. But then Noah becomes a covenant because you're bringing someone who has left back to the relationship. Same thing with Abraham. And we said, what's the difference between Noah and Abraham? Remember? Noah is, the covenant with Noah is renewal of the relationship with Adam. But what about Abraham? I wanted you to keep this in mind. Abraham was a very special covenant. It has threefold in it. Abraham was to establish what? Priests. He wanted special people to take care of Noah's family. Noah is the whole humanity. He wants very dedicated people. You need a teacher for a class. You need a president for a country. You need a leader for an army. You need a father for a family. So if the family of God is Noah's family, then who is going to be the priest or the leader or the one to lead them to God? Will be Abraham. It's a very special mission to Abraham. The book of Genesis ends with the family of Abraham in Egypt. It's 50 chapters, 4 events, 4 patriarchs, and 13 persons, and 3 covenants. God created everything, seen and unseen. We go through this and we went through it, and the chapters is spelled out. This is a summary of the book. The book of Exodus is 40 chapters. It's narrative, 20 chapters only. Non-narrative, 20 chapters. The Greek word for Exodus means exit, leaving, departure. The book begins with the 4th generation of the family of Jacob's slavery in Egypt and ends up with them by Mount Sinai. This book ends at Mount Sinai, receiving the commandments and instructions to build the tabernacle. So the book starts in Egypt, but it ends in Mount Sinai. So remember, in geography, you have Egypt, you have the Red Sea, you have Sinai, and you have the Promised Land in the map. Egypt, Red Sea, Mount Sinai, the Promised Land. So Exodus is supposed to be going out of Egypt and should have reached the Promised Land. But something happened in the middle by Mount Sinai where they had the covenant. And instead of going to the Promised Land, they went very close to the Promised Land and they started to do what? Wander in the desert. And the movie that I would recommend watching for the geography of it and some leftover of what happened is called Mountain of Fire, the search for the real Mount Sinai, and it actually shows you the mountain of Moses in Saudi Arabia. So this makes much more sense because when I was younger, I studied the book of Exodus when I was actually 15 years old. I don't remember. It was like second year in prep school in Egypt, which is like 8th grade or 7th grade. And I was reading this. Next day I had a test in Arabic. It was a very boring subject for me. I hated it. So I didn't study the book of Exodus out of love for the book of Exodus, but I studied it. I started reading it out of running away from studying for the test. And after 5 chapters exactly, my whole perspective on the Bible changed because I got attracted big time. It fascinated me. I started reading maybe around 9 o'clock. I finished at 3 a.m. in the morning. It was so much attractive and so much grasping of my attention. And I asked myself, and I was living it. It's almost like imagining everything going on. I said, where in Sinai? We don't have anything. You know, in Egypt, when you grow up in Egypt, every corner in Egypt have an ancient relic. A temple, a tomb, something. You know, people in Upper Egypt, they dig in the ground and they find stuff till today. It is layers upon layers upon layers of artifacts, ancient. Every layer is a different century, a different time. So I said, there's nothing in Sinai. With all these major events happening, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people moving, you can't find anything left over? I couldn't believe it. And then I looked into the maps. I have some books, very few books, but one of them had the maps of the Bible, and I looked for Midian, and Midian turned out to be in Saudi Arabia. And I said, there has to be something wrong with this. I don't know, I don't understand what it is, but I don't get the feeling that we know exactly where this happened. So 2001, I was on the YouTube, and it hit me this movie, the Search for the Real Mount Sinai, and I saw this. And it's really explained to me all what the questions I had when I was 14, 15 years old. That's why I like that movie, and I keep looking at Google Maps or Google Earth to find what they have found more and more. And every year I find something new. They find something new in that place in Saudi Arabia. Anyway, the book of Numbers. It is 36 chapters narrative, and some of it is non-narrative, especially the first 10 chapters. First 10 chapters is non-narrative. The book starts in the desert with God telling Moses to take census of all the Israelites. They call it in Hebrew, by Midbar. By Midbar. What's by Midbar in Hebrew? In short, in the desert, in the wilderness. So it is actually telling the story of Israel in the desert. But in the Greek, it's called Numbers. Why is it called Numbers in the Greek? Because there are 3 censuses. When you listen to most people, they tell you 2 censuses, but I'm going to tell you there are 3. One, in chapter 1, immediately as it begins, God tells Moses, let us make a census of all, listen, I showed you to understand the censuses, of all the males, 20 years and above, the one who had finished their 20th birthday and above. Why? Because their names will be calculated so that when the promised land is divided, each of them will have a portion of the land equal to the other for their families. So why is that? Because he will divide the promised land to them. That's chapter 1. What happens after? What happens after they disobey God and they actually lose their faith and trust in God, and they back out of the deal, and they don't want to enter the promised land, and they start turning around in the wilderness? God said, you're going to turn for 40 years until all this generation, 20 years and above, going through a wandering in the desert for 40 years, God wanted to make sure that all of them is dead before any one of them entered the promised land, because they didn't trust him. So what happens? After you finish the wandering, right? They will have to do that survey again, which is chapter 26. So after they finish the 40 years, you have a new generation, the younger ones that were very baby children, when they did the first census. So that same census is going to have to be redone. So the new males who had reached 20 years and older will be the one to enter the promised land. Okay? So these are the 2 big censuses. They're one and the same, but repeated one generation, and the second one is the other generation. What's the third one, which is very important? In chapter 3. So you have chapter 1, the first census in Numbers. Chapter 26 is the last census. The second census and the smaller census is when in chapter 3, God says, I don't want your firstborn anymore. Take them back. They're not consecrated to me. I want the Levites. Why? He said, because when Moses went back from the mountain after the 40 days and saw you worshiping the golden calf, he said, whoever consecrated to God, let him come to me. And when Moses screamed in a loud voice, no firstborn came. The firstborn didn't come. Who did come to him? The Levites. And Moses said, today you need to consecrate yourself to God. Everyone who's worshiping the golden calf, committing a capital crime, and committing adultery, they were like loose. They were loose. So they killed them. So they killed their own family. If they find their family doing this, they would kill them. And Moses says, today you consecrated yourself to God. So they had to change. Count the firstborn males 1 month and older, and replace them with a Levite 1 month and older. And when they counted them, they replaced, and they found that the firstborn are much more than the Levites, so they had to pay money instead of the leftover. This was the 3 censuses in the book of Numbers. Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is all non-narrative. It's 34 chapters. The name of the book comes from the Greek word that means second law. Deuteronomos, the second law, includes Moses' final speeches. Where did he give those speeches? They're all given by the Plains of Moab when they were at the border of the Promised Land. From the first sermon in chapter 1 to 4, the second sermon in chapters 4 to 27, and the third sermon chapter 27 to 34. And I give you some important hints to important stuff about the major accounts. For example, the Ten Commandments second rendering, that's why it's called the second law, in chapter 5. The Shema prayer, chapter 6, we talked about it last time. The reasoning for the gift of manna, chapter 8. The instructions for the king, what you do when you have a king, chapter 17. The prophet like Moses, chapter 18, can be divided into 3 portions. Those are the 3 sermons. The first speech, the second speech, and the third speech. For example, the most important accounts are actually in the second sermon, because the Shema and the manna and the prophet and the king, they're all in the second sermon. Third sermon had something about it. It's actually at the end, there is the curses and the blessings. He divided the people into 2 groups, and he said to them, they're not going to do it here. But he gave them instructions. When you enter the Promised Land, there's 2 mountains. Gerizim is one of them, and there's an opposite mountain. One of them is green, very lush. The other one is very dry. It's 2 hills. He said, divide the people when you enter the Promised Land. A group stands on this mountain, a group stands on this mountain, and the Levites in the middle. And the Levites would shout curses and blessing. If they say curses, the people who are on the dry mountain will say Amen. If he says blessing, the people on the green mountain will say Amen. So who is cursing and who's blessing? The people are cursing and blessing themselves. That's in chapters 20, I think it's chapter 27, 28. And then he gives the final blessing and the prayer of Moses. Now, I move to the timeline. This is important, actually. I want you to look at this. I put it a number by itself. The desert timeline wandering in the plains from Exodus to the Plains of Moab. Oh, we move this from here. Here we go. Okay. So, day 1 we will count from Exodus. Remember how I said the beginning of their history started at Passover, right? Passover is day 1. Few days, we don't know how long, it might be 2 days, 3 days, they crossed the Red Sea. That's the second station. In bold, these are big stations in their travel. In the 3rd month of their departure, a 3rd month means between day 60 and day 90, they encampment at Mount Sinai. They reached Mount Sinai in those 2 to 3 month period. What happened there? They had the covenant. They were given instruction about the tabernacle, and they built the tabernacle. They had the golden calf as the instructions were given, and the beginning of the first census. And Moses actually said exactly when he did the first census. It is the first day of the 2nd month of the 2nd year. So how long did they stay there? How did they stay there? They left Mount Sinai at the 20th day of the 2nd month of the 2nd year. So how long did they stay at Mount Sinai? Let's say that they reached there at 2 months. And in the second month, on the 20th day, they left. How long did they stay? Round figure. Don't have to be very exact. So they reached there in the second month or the third month, or at least at the end of the second month, let's say 60 days, and they left in the second month, the 20th day of that month, the second year. They stayed there a year, give or take. So they stayed encamping by the mountain for a whole year. And that's why I should expect some remains. You have this huge population staying in one place in the desert. There is nothing. That makes no sense. Not even a child scrapping on a piece of stone. So when you go to Saudi Arabia, you would see that. You would see there is a place that the Saudi, the Bedouins know. This is actually where Moses stayed and his people. There is actually tombs for them. There is over the face of the earth a lot of encampment places, rounded stones, fireplaces, altars, grinding stones, spearheads. Everything is made in the style of the Egyptians in Saudi Arabia. Why would you have Egyptian stuff in Saudi Arabia? It makes no sense. So, so the 20th day they leave. By the end of that month, it took them 11 days to reach, 11 days, from Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, which is the Plains of Moab. Took them 11 days. That's not far. It's not far at all. 11 days to reach there as a huge group of people. And there they stayed first for 40 days because God told them. Moses told the people, and people said, let's spy the land. And God said, sure, go spy it. Pick one from your tribe, 12 tribes, 12 of them, go spy the land. They went to spy the land, spent 40 days. And here's something for me, I always think about it. Why did Jesus have to stay with his apostles for 40 days after his resurrection? What is the point? Yes. They were our 12 spies that they would actually witness and handle the resurrected body of Christ. That's what you will be. This is what we are called to be, like him. Like him. So they had to spend 40 days with the Lord. So 40 days the spies spent in the promised land, then what? Came back. Here is democracy. The beauty of democracy when it's perfect, right? 12 spies. 10 of them come back and say, beautiful land, as God said exactly, but no, we cannot go because the people are giants, big, huge people. Most probably they're like maybe 6 foot and above. They're 6 feet and above, each one of them. The shortest of them is 6'5" maybe. So you go and try to challenge, those big giant basketball players. And you go walk next to one of them and you're 5 or 5'2" maybe. And you look to them like this, and there's a verse they say in counseling that's beautiful. He says, don't make comparisons. It's really bad. He said, we were in their eyes, in the numbers, and in our eyes like grasshoppers. Like when you take the stand, the point of view of a grasshopper. You're walking in the grass, and somebody's a grasshopper next to you. What would you do as a grasshopper? Stay away of their way because they can actually smush you. They will not see you. So they didn't care they were spies. They really looked at them and said, oh, little people, it's okay. So they went back and told the Israelites, we can't take it. We can't take it. 2 of them said, doesn't matter. The taller they are, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Doesn't matter. But 2, what would they do against 10? What would 2 do against 10? They said, don't do that. Don't mistrust God. Don't distrust God because we have been with the Egyptians. We had seen what happened with the Egyptians. It has only been a year, people. A year. We saw what happened to them. Have you forgotten? Nobody listened to them. They wanted to stone Moses and Aaron, go back to Egypt. And it was bad. And I call this democracy at its best. 10 against 2. Who wins in democracy? 10. What happened? They refused to go. And God said to Moses, you know what? They're right. They shouldn't be entering the promised land. This generation is not ready. turn around, and here's something that's very sad, and Moses cried big time and begged God to forgive him. He said, you turn around and go by the way of the Red Sea, 40 years is written on you. For each day they spent in the promised land, they will have to spend 1 year in the wilderness until this generation completely goes away. I'm going to take their kids, who they said, those people said, they will take our kids and make them slaves. He said, no, I'm taking your kids and make them the landowners. Forget about you. So this happened. You want to hurt God, but really to hurt him is distrust him. Sin, God can take. But to distrust God, no. It's not going to be okay. So at Kadesh Barnea, the end of the second month of the second year, they spent 40 days spying the promised land. Then the beginning of 40-year generation-long march, wandering for 40 years. You cross the 40 years, the second time. They come back to the same place, but this time it's called Acacia Grove. The king of Edom, Moab and Edom are close to each other, brings a soothsayer. The Bible calls him prophet, but he's a soothsayer, fortune teller. A person who, because you might say, a prophet, why would a prophet curse Israel? That doesn't make sense. He's not a prophet for God. He's a soothsayer. He's a, what does it call it? A spiritist, psychic reading. Somebody who is really, by the way, those people are correct. They have powers. This is not a joke. But God intervened. So he told him, I'm going to give you big money. Come and curse these people. You know the story with the donkey, when the donkey talked? That's Balaam. So he comes on his way. He is so much interested in the money, he will do anything. He asks Balak to make sacrifices for him 7 times. And each time he starts to speak, instead of saying curses, what happens? He blesses 7 times. And he, at the end, Balak said, go back to your home before I kill you, because you're not good. So what happened? Balak said, just wait a second. Let me say my blessing, and then I will deal with you. So he let God speak through him, and when God spoke through Balaam, God blessed Israel. That's how he is. God does not let go. They are not good, they are bad, they are whatever, but God is still interested in blessing them. And Balaam said, okay, done with the blessing. Let me tell you something. You're not going to read this in the book of Numbers. It's going to be in Revelation. Balak, king, come, I'll tell you what we should do. I cannot curse them. I cannot curse them. God will not let me curse them, but I can tell you how they can curse themselves. So he said what? Now, Balak, the king, is the king of Moab. The king of Moab. Moab was one of the strongest worshippers of Baal. How do you worship Baal? Excuse me in what I'm going to say. It is by erecting big temples. It's almost like Venus temple in Corinth. Fill it with girls who dedicated themselves to be prostitutes for Baal. So it is double whammy. You go into the temple, and those girls will have sexual relationship with the men that comes to the temple and offer that as an offering too. So what is there? Idol worship and also sexual immorality. So he said, you don't have to curse them. Don't. Just send those girls to the people, the Israelites, and they will curse themselves. The second time they come to the promised land, at the border, Balak listened to Balaam, and he gives them money for that, and send out the girls of Moab, and they started to do this. Started to worship Baal by sexual immorality. And there's a scene described in the book of Numbers about one of the great princes in Israel taking one of those girls and offering it to the other men in the tribes. And one of the priests came out with a spear, and he speared both of them when they were lying together. And this ended up with a plague, except when that priest did this, the plague stopped. The plague stopped. And we tell you that Moses and the elders of Israel were crying at the door of the tabernacle like women, just sitting there and just weeping. But Eleazar, that priest, went, and God said he stopped the plague because he did what God felt. It's not about the sexual immorality, more than about what? The worship of Satan. His people are leaving him to worship Satan. This is the biggest problem. And the act was very wicked and corrupt. So after that plague is finished, they go and do the second census that I told you about. Okay? So this is the summary. This is the summary of all the events that happened in the 40 years. I put it into pieces from the Torah. So the 8:3 is the foot of Mount Sinai, encampment by Mount Sinai in the covenant in the third month, in the third month, we don't know exactly when, 60 to 90, had gone out of the land of Egypt. On the same day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. They had departed from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. So Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has said we will do. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and he rose early in the morning, built an altar at the foot of the mountain, still in the ceremony of the covenant, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young men of the children of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has said we will do, and be obedient. And Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, this is the blood of the covenant, like Jesus is going to say it in the New Testament, this is the cup of the new covenant with my blood, which the Lord has made with you according to all these words. The 2 tablets, the instructions and for the tabernacle and the golden calf. After that, after the ratification of the covenant with the sacrifices and the blood and the celebration meal. So when they get done with the covenant and Moses spilled the blood, the elders, the 70 judges, went up the mountain with Moses and Aaron, and they ate. They made a big table on the mountain, and they ate in front of God. They saw a theophany of God. They saw something, and we talked about it. They saw something under his feet. Then God after that said, come up to me on the mountain and be there, and I will give you tablets of stone and the law and commandments which I have written, that you may teach them. Now when the people saw that Moses delayed 40 days, during the 40 days sometimes, they gathered to Aaron, who is the other leader, and said to them, come, make us gods that shall go before us. For this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, now it's the man, not God. We do not know what has become of him. And Aaron said to them, break off the golden earrings. Here Aaron is actually making a big mistake. And Moses is going to have to intercede for Aaron. But he was afraid of them. So he took their gold and he fashioned it with an engraving tool, something to engrave, and made a molded calf, the two of them. Then they said, this is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. That's the golden calf. The third. So we said, they were trying to keep the presence of God with them, and God is going to give them another solution. I make a tabernacle, a place of my dwelling. The Tabernacle Narrative. This is something I want you to know about. What's the Tabernacle Narrative? It is the piece of the Torah. It's a lot of Torah. A piece of the Torah talks about the tabernacle. Where do we have it start and where it ends? It stands at the center of the Torah. I brought this from the Jewish Study Bible. And although it takes up almost a third, 1/3 of the Torah is a tabernacle narrative. So it's not something small. This is what God has done to establish his presence among us, among his people. He's going to live with them. It's very profound. God lives with people. This is something crazy to think about. And he said, takes a third of the Torah, it covers the time span of less than 1 year. Why do we say that? What's time 1 year? Their presence where? At the foot of Mount Sinai, right? This indicates its crucial importance. All the institutions that ultimately shaped Israel's nation and religious existence, the law, which is Leviticus and Deuteronomy, the priesthood, the forms of temple worship, the tribal foundation of its society, are said to have been ordained and established during this brief period in Israel's history. According to the story that emerged from the Torah as a whole, the Tabernacle Narrative is a stage in Israel's sojourn at Sinai, interwoven with the theophany and proclamation of the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, and the giving of the laws and the covenant ceremony, the giving of the 2 sets of tablets, and the incident of the golden calf. This is in between. The Tabernacle Narrative is in between those. The Tabernacle Narrative is the part of the Torah that covers the time at the foot of Mount Sinai. The Tabernacle Narrative includes Exodus, chapters 25 to 50, the whole book of Leviticus, and Numbers, chapter 1 to 10. If I ask you what books, what chapters are included in Tabernacle Narratives, these are it. Chapters 25 to 50 of Exodus, everything in Leviticus, straightforward, and 1 to 10 of Numbers, the non-narrative part of Numbers. So what is the history of Tabernacle, since it is important? In the beginning, the Tabernacle was not given to Moses as description. What did Moses do? He took his own tent, took it outside the camp and pitched it somewhere else by itself. And he, according to God's instruction, would meet God there. Every time Moses entered, we're going to read this, read it together. Now Moses used to take a tent and pitch it outside the camp, some distance away, calling it the tent of meeting. Anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to the tent of meeting outside the camp. And whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people rose and stood at the entrances to their tents. They knew God is coming to speak to Moses, so they would stand in reverence. They were very careful to do that. Stood in front of the tents and not moved until they see the cloud coming down on the tent and Moses going in to speak. And whenever Moses went out to the tent, the people stood at the entrances of their tents watching Moses until he entered the tent. As Moses went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. So he would be standing in the tent inside, and God will be the cloud that's standing there, and Moses will speak to God through that cloud. While the Lord spoke with Moses, whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they all stood and worshipped, each at the entrance. They bowed down all the way to the ground when they saw that cloud coming down. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. So there would be someone always standing there, keeping guard. Then the next step, God gave detailed instructions on building a tabernacle. So the first one was his own tent, but then later God said, no, you cannot do that. Let us build a tent for me. I'll give you instructions about it. This included the needed material to a free will giving. He said, these are the materials are going to give you. But God said something very important. Keep that in mind. I will inspire people to give you things. I will move them so that they give gifts to you that will be used for the tabernacle. The tabernacle design, he gave him, the blueprint. He actually showed him projections, 3D projections on the mountain. Moses used to sit there and watch TV for 40 days. But the TV was like 3D. The colors, the measurements, even the craftsmen. He named 2 people. One of them will work with metals and wood, and the other will work with cloth and fabric, whom he inspired to do the work. God moved everybody to do this. The tabernacle is divided into 3 sections. The outer court, walled, has an entrance, no roof. It's just wall. And it contains the bronze altar. The first thing you come through the door from the wall, you will find the bronze altar. And I'm going to show you this here. The first one is this. The wall is here. This is the wall. And then the entrance here, there's an entrance. And then the bronze altar of burnt offering. What is the next thing? The laver. The laver is the basin where you have water. That's why it's in blue. The bronze altar in red because there's blood sacrifices on this one. Then you move to something called the holy place. It is enclosed, not just walled. It has a roof. It's a tent. This is where your tent is. The tent is here. This one. That big box here. And it has 2 sections. One is called the holy place, It is enclosed with another entrance. So you move through one door and then another door. It has three things: the table of showbread, the lampstand, and the incense, the altar of incense. The altar of incense looks like Mangale, if you want to remember anything. That looks like an altar of incense. The table of the showbread is like this table, and the menorah is like a candelabra, like a candle stand, with 7 branches. Then you move into the next place, which is called the Holy of Holies, and it's completely veiled by a veil, and it's enclosed with a veil on its entrance, contains the Ark of the Covenant, that's it, and its mercy seat. What's the mercy seat? It's the cover of the Ark. Inside the Ark, later they collected stuff into it, the 2 tablets of stone, the pot of manna, the rod of Aaron. I want to add a little detail here. Everything in this holy place and the Holy of Holies is made of gold. Everything out here is made of bronze. This outer court is bronze. You move inside the holy place is gold, and inside is gold. Gold covering wood, of course. Wood covered by gold. Now we talked about the tabernacle, then we go into the first census. This has all happened at the foot of Mount Sinai. And I said this is how he made the census. He said, take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel by their families, by their fathers' houses, according to the number of names. Every male individually, from 20 years, I said fighting men, has to be fighting men, from 20 years old and above, all who are able to go to war in Israel. You and Aaron shall number them by their armies. The census of the firstborn had happened at the same time. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, now behold, I myself have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, and instead of every firstborn who opens the womb among the children of Israel, therefore the Levites shall be mine, because all the firstborn are mine. On the day that I struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I sanctified to myself all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast. They shall be mine. I am the Lord. Then the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, number the children of Levi by their fathers' houses, by their families. You shall number every male from a month old and above. And that change is happening here in Numbers 3. Take a Levite for every firstborn. This is what happened at the foot of Mount Sinai. They're going to start moving from Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea by the Plains of Moab. 40 days at Kadesh, spying the promised land, 40 years in the desert. First, from Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, now it came to pass on the 20th day of the 2nd month in the 2nd year, that the cloud was taken up. What they did, every time God wants them to move, what happens? The cloud lifts up from the tabernacle and move in front of them. And God gave them order, which tribe comes after the tabernacle, which tribe comes after, and which tribe. There is an order how to move and how to encamp. Everything was in order. Everything in the book on the Torah was extremely detailed and ordered. There is nothing that's left for people to guess. Nothing. Now it came to pass on the 20th day, I said, that the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle of testimony, and the children of Israel set out from the wilderness of Sinai on their journeys. Then the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. So they started out for the first time according to the command of the Lord, and they had by the hand of Moses. Then they go to Kadesh Barnea, which is 11 days there. While Israel encamped in the plains of Moab, their spies went into the promised land and spent 40 days there. When they came back, they confirmed the goodness of the land to the Israelites. 10 spies discouraged the people to go in and take the land. 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua. Caleb is the tribe of Judah. He was the representative, the representative of the house of Judah, the tribe of Judah. And Joshua was for the Levites. They encouraged the people to trust in God. The people lost their trust in God and listened to the 10. God was displeased according to the number of the days, he said, in which you spied out the land, 40 days. For each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. What's God speaking like? What's he speaking like? Who would say something like this? I will surely do so to all this evil generation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be consumed, and there they shall die. He speaks like a father. You know, when you give your child a discipline, he's not saying to them, I give up. You're not my people anymore. Is he saying that? No. He said, I'm going to give you a prescribed discipline. A prescribed discipline. But these people are going to enter the promised land because he promised his family to enter the promised land. But maybe not this generation. The last part, they go for 40 years and they come back and after 40 years, and this is the sin at the Plains of Moab. Balak and Balaam and the plague. After 40 years of wandering, all the first generation died in the wilderness. The second generation arrived at the Plains of Moab again. This time they call it Acacia Grove. Balak, the king of Moab, promised Balaam, the soothsayer, I don't like to call him a prophet because I don't want you to get confused, a great payment. He was called both, actually. He called both soothsayer and a prophet. To have the Israelites curse themselves by idolatry. Balaam was prevented from cursing Israel. God didn't let him. But he said, you can let them curse themselves by idolatry and sexual defilement with the female servants of Baal. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove by the Plains of Moab, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their God. That's the whole point. And the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Beor, and the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. Joined to the Baal, what does that mean? This is a language spoken about marriage. What does it mean? Do you get the hint? And the man leaves his father and mother, and for this reason, a man leaves his father and mother, and he cleave to his wife, and the two become one. So this is the same language. Israel joined means as if he is married to God, and now he's actually joining Baal. So this is the sin of apostasy. And in that time, the plague started, and it came to pass after the plague that the Lord spoke to Moses and Eleazar, the son of Aaron. Aaron had died at that time. The priest saying, take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel from the 20 years and old and above by their fathers' houses, all who are able to go to war in Israel. For this reason, the two censuses and the small one, the book of Numbers is called Numbers. Okay? And that's it. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about this? Because I will stop here. And maybe I can take a time to show you some of the stuff from Mount Sinai. Again, just want to make sure that you understand the list of the timeline. It's very important you understand the timeline. It took me a lot of work to get this done so that you can see it all in one page. So Exodus in the first day, Red Sea crossing, we don't know how long after that, maybe 3, 5, 6 days, a week. Encampment at Mount Sinai and between 60 and 9 days in the third month. Then at the foot of Mount Sinai, they accomplished the covenant, the tabernacle, the golden calf, the first census, which was done on the first day of the second month of the second year. And then they start moving from there, and I didn't put it there, toward Kadesh Barnea on the 20th day of the second month, 19 days later, after the census was accomplished. And then they stayed in Kadesh Barnea for 40 days. They took 11 days to reach there and stayed 40 days for the spies to go around. When they came back and they did this big problem, they had to wander in the desert for 40 years. After 40 years wandering, they come back at the Plains of Moab, and then at the Plains of Moab, Balak calls for Balaam, and you know the story with the donkey, and he was very interested in the money. And Balaam the soothsayer tried to curse Israel 7 times, couldn't. God prevented him, and eventually he blessed. Then he told Balak what to do, and we know about this from the book of Revelation, and it's chapter 3, I think. And then they fall into idolatry and adultery and sexual immorality with worshipping of Baal, and they get into a plague. They start to get very sick and die. And it was for, I forgot, was it Phineas, the priest who did a version of the plague. And then after the plague, the second census. Let me share with you some of the pictures of the stuff at Mount Sinai. The search for the real Mount Sinai. And these pictures will show you different things. So how about if I go into, let me see if I can go into Google Earth. How about that? That's fun. Google Earth is more fun than YouTube. I believe so. I'll show you different things. What happened? Can't stop because... Huh? Zoom maybe is taking it. Okay, let's see if I can go this way. Jabal al-Loz. Here we go. Images. Here is the mountain. And you see how the top of the mountain is dark? I don't have a shade. Okay, 1 second. Harder. Okay. So this is the images of Mount Sinai, and that's how it is very high, and actually clouds come to shroud it from time to time, but the top of it is black, very dark black, and in Saudi Arabia they call it Jabal al-Loz because Loz in Arabic means almond, the mountain of almond, because there's a lot of almond trees. So in all the pictures you see this top part that is very dark, very dark. I don't know where it is gone here. Yeah, see how it is black? This top of it is very black. I want to see what this tourist company does, if I can go with them. Okay. So, let us see. Let's see. Split rock. Saudi. So this is the rock that Moses hit and was split in half, and it's very famous. The Saudi knows it. That's where you see, when you get closer to the image, you will see the water erosion all over the place. And this says that the water that came from the rock is very, very big. And this is how it stands from a distance. Let's see. It's a big rock. It's not a small rock. And if you can get pictures of people, this is how it looked when Moses did it, actually. This is a very realistic image. That's what we think. I think this is true. It was that much to cause that much water erosion. And this is how the image is. Look at the human being here. It's like very far up. But look at all these holes. See these holes? This is where the water is coming from everywhere in this area. This rock was split in half because water came splitting it. That means a huge force, very big force. Let me see if I have more picture of that. This is from far. This is closer in that valley. And they say in that valley there is water signs in the ground. There's no sand in this area. It's all pieces of granite that's flaked off the rock. Okay, so this is the split rock. What about the mountain? See the altar of sacrifice. The altar of sacrifice that Moses did. The altar. In the morning, after they did read the covenant, he had to go down at the foot of the mountain and build an altar of sacrifice. Here it is. If you go on Google Earth, you would see this shape. That's Moses' altar. You see, the altar is here at the end. This is the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, right there, he has this animal chutes, like channels, and there is an altar here. They found ashes, a lot of ashes of animals, burned animals in this area here. And then here on the ground, there's marble-like white stones, rounded. You see, they call it Jabal Makla. The pillars. Here, he's in the animal chute. And here is the pillars. Look at this. Rounded, it's a human-made cut, different ones. They will stack them on top of each other to make 12 stones or 12 pillars. And that's the people there think this is the place where Moses was hid when God moved by and he had to cover him, where he had the commandments. And let me go into the golden calf, golden calf altar. It's all in one place. When you go on Google Earth, you would say golden calf altar, Saudi Arabia, and you would see that carving that we talked about. Here it is. The Saudis know it is. It's a monument. What is this? Is this Pinterest? No, we don't want that. Let's see. They have it fenced by barbed wire to make sure that nobody goes behind that. Let us get out of here. Okay. Let me show you where the carvings are. Here. This one. Here is the carving. You find a bull or a calf carved exactly like the ones in the ancient Egyptian temples. See if this has. This is the movie I told you about. These are the couple who used to work in the oil company, and this kind of the first people I've heard of to make a documentary about this, and they spoke about the mountain and how many times they visited. And this is the cave in front of the mountain where I think Elijah had hid himself for 40 days or traveled to that place for 40 days from Jezebel. This couple still have this is how black this mountain is on the top. They have a ministry up in, I think down in Texas, where they talk about these things. And you're going to see the difference between the black part of the mountain and the regular rock of the mountain, where they think the blackness happened because of the descent of God with fire on it. and they have discovered things on this. This is the altar of the sacrifice, Moses' altar, and the pillars. They resembled it to the Egyptian stuff, the same style. He's going to talk about there's almond trees, and this actually it's a tree that they think it is the burning bush, the only big tree in the area, and the split rock, and you can see how it is gouged in the middle from the inside of the rock. It's gouged where the water actually kind of split the rock into half. We talked about from the book of Psalms. And the water erosion on the rocks around it, all the way down to where there was a big lake. No sand, it's all flaked granite. And I want to see where there is grinding stones for the manna. And that's what I want to see. It's a very peculiar thing. See, that's it. I'm going to show you these are the quails. Show you the grinding stone in her hand now. This is it. They found tons of these. It's a small egg-shaped stone with a bowl kind of stone. They put something here and grind it by hand. It's portable grinding mills because you cannot carry the big mills. It's very difficult. You need like a big 6 people to carry it and move it. My grandmother had one of those. Had a couple of them actually, but it's impossible. You can do it. Nobody can carry it. So these are easier to carry. And you grind the manna, and the women used to grind. They found lots of those. And spearheads, let me show you. And spearheads and arrows and arrowheads. Here we go, spearhead. And all made in the Egyptian style. So this is actually Saudi Arabia. That's what I have. Any questions? I have some chat. So there's a typo there, Exodus stops at 40. Okay, I will take care of that. So the commandments and the ceremony was not in Mount Sinai, but in Saudi Arabia. To those who are wondering what Saudi Arabia is about, Sinai is not a fixed name for Egypt. That's true. So Seraphim says Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. Let me show you where is this coming from so that you don't get confused. And I'm going to go to the letter to the Galatians. The letter to the Galatians. Okay, it's 3. I'm just bringing it out. I'm looking it up. It's 4:20-22. Let me just share that. Okay. So, in verse 25, chapter 4 in the Galatians, for this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. What does Arabia mean? Arabia means Saudi Arabia. That peninsula, that huge peninsula that we call today Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and then Yemen, all of this is called Arabia in the time of St. Paul. So he's saying Mount Sinai is in Arabia. It's not really in Sinai, Egypt. And if you look at antiquities, you will know that God said to Moses, you will bring your people here. When he met him in the burning bush, where did God meet Moses in the burning bush? It was in Midian. I will give you the old name for Midian is Madiana in ancient maps. That's where I saw it for the first time when I was young. Old maps of Midian, not Medina, of Midian images. Here we go. Oh, it's up here somewhere. Midian is up in near Jordan in the ancient maps by different people. So they have it here. Say it again. So Midian is not in Egypt. This is Sinai. Midian, where the burning bush was, is here somewhere, but I can't get this to work. Huh? Yes, I'm going to stop and share, and we'll go look for it again. So when God says to Moses, you will bring your people here. What is here? Here is this area here. I'm trying to get it. And that's where Midian is. So many places in the antiquities says Midian is not Egypt, has nothing to do with Egypt. It's another country, it's another kingdom, it's another tribe, another people. So in maps, so ancient maps might not be. Okay. I guess I made my point. It's in Saudi Arabia. It's not in Egypt. To be out of Egypt is to be outside the borders of Sinai. Sinai is still Egypt. So with all the artifacts found in Saudi Arabia, it is very difficult to actually accept Sinai and St. Catherine especially as the place. St. Catherine was known as a tradition with a small t from 3rd or 4th century Egypt, Christian Egypt, in the time of Helena and Constantine. All right, that's it. Yes, let's say our Father. Oh, there's a question. I had a question, what are wave offering? I saw it was wave offerings. You said a lot in Leviticus, but I don't know what it is. A wave offering, let me do this. If you see me on the screen, is to take something and to offer it to God like this. You would see a Jewish do it till today. They would hold something and they would do like this. 3 times, and they go to the other side 3 times, and they would go 3 times, and they would go 3 times. This way. Four sides. That's a wave offering. Let's pray thankfully. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory now and forever. May the love of God the Father, grace of his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. Peace be with you.